Hello and welcome back to the Ultimate Quant Review, or UQR. This is the second video in my intro and free preview to the Ultimate Quant Review GMAT math course. And in this particular video, I'm going to discuss some alternative approaches to standard math. And these alternative approaches, I will confess, they're not original. Okay, these alternative approaches are used throughout the industry. For those of you familiar with the GMAT, you've probably heard of the idea of picking numbers and plugging in answer choices. But they're very important. And one of the keys, of course, is not just how to pick numbers and how to plug in answer choices, but quickly recognizing the triggers for when to pick numbers and plug in answer choices. So picking numbers, got 3 triggers there. Plugging in answer choices, got 2 triggers there. And in this video, I'm just going to discuss picking numbers, and I'm just going to discuss one trigger. That's it in this particular video. And in this free preview, by the way. In the actual course, you will of course see all 3 triggers, as well as the 2 triggers for plugging in answer choices, and the method behind how to pick numbers and how to plug in answer choices. But for now, why don't we just talk about this first trigger, please? So, picking numbers, as I just said, there are 3 triggers. However, again, in this video, we're just going to talk about one, and it's kind of a mouthful. But if you see fractions, percents, or ratios in the question and the answers, and really important, an unknown whole value, that's a trigger for you to pick a number. Now, we haven't talked about how to do that yet, but looking at this question, just doing our step 1 of our trigger method, just scanning over everything really quickly, looking for the triggers. I mean, if I just scan over this, I see 2/3, I see 1/4, and I see fractions in the answers. In addition, further scans indicate no whole value. So right off the bat, I have this trigger. Got it. I'm going to end up picking a number. And to do that, I mean, if you haven't seen this before, it might seem a little bit tricky, but it's really not so bad. And to show you that, though, let me kind of get rid of this page and have a cleaner page, please. Oh, there we go. All right. So let's read over this again a little bit more carefully. So we have several neglected rabbits were divided among 3 rescue groups. 2/3, there's my fraction of the rabbits, were placed with either Save a Bunny or House Rabbit, while the rest were placed with Carly Pals. If 1/4 of all the rabbits were placed with Save a Bunny, what fraction of the rabbits that were placed with House Rabbit or Carly Pals were placed with Carly Pals? Yeesh. That's a lot of stuff there. But again, I took note of the trigger, fractions in the question and the answer choices, no whole value, so I know I'm going to have to pick a number for the unknown whole value. Well, what do I mean by that? What is our unknown whole value? Well, going back up to the question, going back up to this 2/3 here, right? It says 2/3 of, and the key word here is of the rabbits. Whatever follows the of, that's going to be our unknown whole value. So I'm going to pick a number for the number of rabbits. I'm going to work from there. Now, that begs the question, what number am I going to pick? Well, when you have fractions with an unknown whole value and you're going to pick a number, you're going to want to pick some kind of common denominator. So since I have 2/3 and 1/4, the common denominator between the two is 12. So I'm going to say, assume we have 12 rabbits. Now I'm just going to get to work and write down everything I can figure out, and of course I'm going to stay nice and organized and define my elements. That's something that I discussed in the previous video. So in other words, what can I figure out if I have 12 rabbits? Well, going back up to the question, 2/3 of the rabbits were placed with either Save a Bunny or House Rabbit. So what that means is I can figure out that the rabbits with S for Save a Bunny or H for House Rabbit is 2/3 of 12. 12 times 2/3, and that's going to equal 8. Now, before I move on, there's something I can figure out. Therefore, as indicated by this little triangle here, if I know that S or H had 8, I can figure out what remains. I know, therefore, that Carly Pals must have 4. Right? I started with 12 rabbits up here. I had 8 rabbits go to Save a Bunny or House Rabbit. Therefore, Carly Pals gets the 4 remaining rabbits. That's an example. That's something I discussed in the previous video. That's an example of always looking to write down what remains after you do a certain function. We took 2/3 of 12. We got 8. Always look to write down what remains. The GMAT loves for their test takers to do that. So we're going to do that. Let me keep reading. From this second sentence, please. If 1/4 of all the rabbits were placed with Save a Bunny. Okay, well that means Save a Bunny gets 1/4 of all the rabbits. That's 12 times 1/4, which equals to 3. And before I even keep reading, therefore, I know if, again, going back up to the top here, if S or H have 8, right? And I know S has 3, therefore H must have 5. Okay? Again, looking to write down what remains. Now let's keep reading, going back to the question here from this word what. What fraction of the rabbits that were placed with house rabbit or Carly pals? So I talk about fractions later on in the course, but let me just talk a little bit about that now, where it says what fraction. The key word again, by the way, is the word of. See how I have this of here? When they say what fraction or what percent, the denominator will be indicated by the words immediately following this of. Of. So it says the rabbits that were placed with a house rabbit or Carly pals. So that means my denominator is going to be house rabbits plus Carly pals. And I know what that is, right? I know house rabbits is 5 and Carly pals is 4, so that our denominator is 9. The other term will be our numerator. So going back up to the question from this were here, were placed with Carly pals. So Carly pals is going to be my numerator, which is 4, which is 4, which is 4. So my answer is 4/9. Answer choice C. So notice we suddenly get to the answer, right? And if you know to quickly pick numbers based on the fact that we have fractions with an unknown whole value, pick a common denominator for the unknown whole value, the question will work itself out a lot more quickly. Definitely an alternative strategy you're going to want to know. That being said, let me do a quick review of what I just said before I move on. So when to pick numbers. Excuse me, let me do another question. Excuse me, let me do another question, and then I will do a review. So let's do another question, when to pick numbers. 3 triggers, fractions, percents, or ratios in the question and the answers, and an unknown whole value. So now what we're going to take a look at is a more difficult question, okay? Certainly more difficult. Scanning it over, just scanning it. I have here 20%, and I have here 10%, and I have here percents in my answer choices. In addition, if I scan over the whole thing, again, no whole value. So again, that's going to be a trigger for me to pick a number. Now, I haven't talked about, look, in your manual, I will go over what we have in the manual in just a minute. Okay, I want to do these 2 questions first, and then I will do a full review of what it is we just did. Now, when it comes to percents, most students will know that you're supposed to pick 100. However, this question is a little bit trickier, okay? In fact, this is definitely a higher level question, and you have to recognize that you're going to have to actually pick 2 numbers here, and the second number is a little bit trickier. So why don't we take a look at this question more as a whole? Oh, there we go. Okay. So backing up a little bit, let's go over this. So we have a certain widget salesman is compensated based solely on the number of widgets he sells each month. If the salesman compensation decreases by 20% per widget sold, by what percent must the salesman increase his monthly sales in order to increase his monthly income? Wow, by 10%. So we have a lot of stuff going on here, and this is what makes this a difficult question. Is not just we're going to pick one number, we're actually going to pick 2 sets of numbers, and this is where things get a little bit tricky. So the first number we're going to pick is his old compensation. And let's just say his old compensation is 10. When you have percents with an unknown whole value, you can always pick 10 or 100. It's just easier to calculate percents in that way. Well, if his old compensation is 10 and it decreases by 20%, I can figure out his new compensation. Decreasing 10 by 20% is pretty easy. That'll give me 8. But now here's where things get very tricky. I have to pick a number for his old income. And that's where things will get a little bit tricky. Now look, I could pick any number I want, but the number I want to pick, I want to have it work well with my other numbers. And this is where you might have to slow down a little bit. Backing up a little bit. The idea is you quickly scan this over. You quickly see I certainly have to pick at least one number. Let me quickly pick 10 and then for the old compensation and then 8 for my new compensation. Done that super quick. Now I have to slow down a little bit because it looks like I'm going to have to pick a number for his old income and I have to think about what number might fit. If you think about it a little bit, and you'll see why kind of after we go through this, we're going to say his old income was 80. Well, his new income, increasing 80 by 10%, would be 88. Okay. Well, now what do I do? Well, you might be stuck, and I discussed that as a trigger. When you're stuck, I discussed that in the previous video. And when we're stuck, we're going to write down anything we can figure out. So, for example, you know what I can figure out? If I had old income as 10 and old income as 80, I can therefore figure out that the widgets sold, widget sales, I'll call them, widget sales, was 8 per month, right? That's his old widget sales. But now, what are his new widget sales? Well, the new compensation is 8 and the new income is 88. Well, therefore, that's going to mean 11 in sales. So this is our 11 is our new sales. Okay. Now I can actually get to the answer because they're actually asking for the percent increase. Now, percent increase is something I go over later on in the course. That's actually a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video. However, percent increase is calculated with this new formula, the new minus the old over the old. So we have that 11 minus 8 over 8, and that's going to be 3/8. And if you work that through, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video. That's going to give you E, answer choice E, 37.5%. Okay. So look, I mean, this is the idea. The GMAT does combine concepts, and this had several combined concepts. Number one, picking numbers, and that was the purpose of this video. The idea also of how to do percent increase and then how to convert a fraction into a percent, which is fairly basic. It's not fun, but it's fairly basic. Okay, so this is not an easy question by any sense. It is basic. If you recognize that picking numbers goes beyond just the easy questions, and that's what a lot of people think. Oh, percent's unknown whole value, that's easy. Not always, okay? And this is definitely a more difficult example. So that being said, let me do a quick review real quick. Picking numbers, 3 triggers. So this is from your UQR manual, and what we just discussed again, fractions, percents, or ratios. In the question of the answers, and, have to have and an unknown whole value. Always pick a workable number for an unknown value. Definitely want to do that. It always, for all levels of math, will make the question a lot easier to do. When you have fractions, you want to pick a common denominator for the whole element. That is following the of, 2/3 of the rabbits. So the rabbits were a whole element. And then you just saw for percents, you want to pick 10 or 100 for the whole element. Again, immediately following the of. Ratios, a little bit tricky, no doubt. And in fact, I do discuss ratios. Don't worry so much about this for now. That's kind of a lot of words there. I come back to ratios later on in the course. Picking numbers for ratios can get a little bit tricky, and I believe it's more effective to discuss the general concept of ratios first, and then I demonstrate when and how to pick numbers for ratios. Again, that's going to be beyond the scope of this particular video and where we are in the lessons. So, once again, picking numbers, 3 triggers. You just saw the first trigger. Okay, and that's quite a bit. I recognize that. This brings us to the end of the second video of our free preview. I hope this was helpful. In the next several videos, what I'm going to do is demonstrate how to attack questions from the official guide, from the diagnostic, official guide, the diagnostic, and I'm going to discuss the more difficult question types, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how a student of mine would attack those questions, okay? In other words, we're going to assume somebody's already taken this course, this killer UQR course, and then now they're attacking the GMAT with ruthless efficiency, and that's what will be demonstrated in the other videos that are available for my free preview. Thank you very much for watching today. I hope this was helpful, certainly helpful enough that you will check out my other free videos and in fact even consider purchasing my course. Thanks very much, and hopefully you'll come back for more.